Welcome back guys to another episode of Under Construction. Today we're going to be working on main project, which is my Ford TF Cortina. So what we're going to be working on today guys is fitting an electric water pump. I bought this as a Davis Craig unit a while back, but I'll show you in a sec. It's going to be a bit of a tight squeeze to where I want to locate it. One of the things I'm going to have to move is the oil filter and relocate it to somewhere else so that this can actually fit. But we'll get started on designing a bracket for this and working out exactly where it's going to sit and what things need to be moved first before we start construction stuff. So here's the little unit here. It's not overly bulky, but I can't place it where the old water pump would go. The old water pump wouldn't fit anyway. So that's the block off and little outlet that you can get. Davis Craig sell the little outlet, and the block off can be bought through another source. So this is the unit here. I want to locate it in that spot there. As you can see, the oil filter's in the way. So we need it to go down as far as we can to the outlet of the radiator. But as you can see, it's too close to the outlet of the radiator. So you won't be able to get a hose in there or a pipe or anything. So I need it to go a little bit further back. And I need this sort of other outlet from the pump to head up. So then it goes into that inlet elbow sort of piece there into the head. So let's start taking the oil filter off and we'll see how we go with that. Okay, so we've taken the dizzy and the oil filter out of the way, and you can see we've got a lot more clearance now. So if I line that up, that's around about level from the floor to the two outlets, the radiator one and the one from the pump. That sort of looks a lot better. So I'll have to put the adapter there where the oil filter used to go and run the oil filter further back towards the steering rack. But a lot more room to play with now, which is a lot better. I can angle the outlet either straight up like that, a bit more of an angle, whichever way is going to work. Alright, let's start designing, I guess. But first I think I'll take all this intake manifold out of the way so I've got a lot more room to see and work with. Okay, that's much better. I've got lots more room to play now. Just a few little pieces that I bought as well from Aeroflow. This is an actual remote filter mount. So that's the bracket there. So you bolt that onto the side of the block or somewhere else, I don't know, anywhere, wherever you're going to locate it. Your fittings go here and your oil filter goes into the bottom and just screws into the base there. So that's that. And this little sandwich adapter, I guess. So this goes where your oil filter would have mounted. So this would have replicated the oil filter, say. So that goes in like that. And then this is your nut that holds it all and seals it all back up again. So it's a good, neat little unit. You've got your inlet and outlet and screw for the base where the oil filter used to screw into. So you've got little, you suit all the different threads. So that comes with it. So you just got to work out which one is the one that you need, screw it in and off you go. Nice and neat. so this fits up much better now. That's around about where I want it to go. So you can see there's lots of room there. So all that's left now is to make a bracket to hold it all. Alright, let's start designing. Okay, so here's the first go at the cardboard mock-up. As you can see, it's not looking too bad. Mounts to some point here. I'm not too sure what went there at some stage from the factory. I can't work out what goes there because the air conditioning goes on the other side. So I'm not too sure what would have been mounted there. But it's not looking too bad. Okay, so this is how we're looking so far. This is a little trench, and the trench basically allows this sort of section of wire with a terminal and everything that goes into the pump to fit in there flush. Because as you can see, these screws here and that section sit out from the base. So what I've done is it sits like that, there in its location. So I've allowed for the screws and for the terminal to sit out. So I'll have a section of metal that sits further up and then the base of it further back. And then it's this shape like that at the moment. So it sort of sits like that on the block. So on the block, if that's the block here, it sits, it's pretty hard to hold. It sits like that. So the water pump mounts to there. The remote oil filter adapter sits here. But now I'm going to have to adapt the bracket for the oil filter where the new oil filter will sit. And that's going to have to go somewhere sort of like that. I'll have to cut a section and right angle it and make it so that it mounts there and it holds a whole lot together because there's no room. You just got to do it slowly, take your time, bit by bit, measure, keep checking, keep bolting it back on and seeing how things are looking. Okay, so here's the finished product, in cardboard of course. So that's where the water pump mounts here. And that'll be where the oil filter adapter will relocate. And that's how it sits in the bay. Now we just got to transfer it to metal. Okay, so what I've got to do now is transfer this onto this plate. This is 3mm plate. It should be enough. I'm going to add a few gussets here and there just to strengthen it a little bit more, make it a little bit stiffer. But basically I'm just going to lay out this pattern and mark around it as far as I can. This area will be separate and will be welded on. This will allow the water pump to sit flush in where the bolts are, and then on its mounting points, which are here, here and here. So we'll just transfer this, then we'll do all the folds that we need to do and do it slowly so we can make sure that we're on the right track. Here's the two pieces roughly cut. Just gave them a quick little file just on the edges just to get all the sharpness out of them from grinding. So that's the plate there, there's the other piece. And we'll start marking out our folds, start folding. Just a little trick that I do for areas that are really hard to bend with what I've got at home. This is 3mm. You'll never bend that on a sheet metal brake. So you've got to find different ways of trying to bend this metal. So what I do, I just do a little cut with the 1mm angle grinder. It's only 1mm deep. So just sort of, you're just skimming it just to create a line. And it just makes it a little bit easier to fold on that area. Those areas that I do those little relief cuts sort of thing, I gusset anyway. So I needed to do that one up in there. So I'm going to gusset that anyway, there and there, there and there. And this I'll be gusseting at these 2 points as well once it's folded that way. So it doesn't take any strength out of it, but it does help you to fold the metal. Okay, there's the 2 pieces cut and folded. Took quite a long time to fold because I don't have the machines to do it, but you've got to make do with what you've got. So that's all folded up. I'm just going to make the holes now. So mark out where they've got to go, drill them, and I'll test fit it. So far, just placing it up in the engine bay, it looks to be okay. And I've got to drill this out and I'll tack it on into place. Okay, so we've finished all the folds. So everything's folded up as it should. It mounts up really nicely. I've just chamfered a little bit the holes, the mounting holes, where they go. We'll have to place another one here after with the like a dowel that I'm going to place on the block. So we'll work that out later once I've got a bit more access to the block. But for now, this will do. The mounting piece for the water pump is all finished up as well. I've also chamfered the holes. These are the mounting holes. These are the clearance holes for the screws that are part of the water pump. So this will go here, like that. We'll weld it on and drill out the holes that need to be drilled out for the mounts. And that's pretty much it. Then we'll make the holes for the oil pump bracket relocator. So we'll mark them out and drill them out as well, see how all that sits. Now I think I need to clearance a little bit here because it looks like the area where the actual oil pump mounts rubs a little bit on the side here, so I'll just chamfer that out as well. And yeah, let's go on to the next step. there's the holes for the oil filter bracket. They're all done. The plate's all welded on to mount the water pump. It looks all nice and neat now. Taped on the back as well. I'll do a full weld later. But for now it's looking good. What I want to do now is in this section here where I've relieved an area for the oil filter bracket to fit. I want to add a bit of strength back in there, so I'm just going to see if I can find some tube in my scrap metal bin that I've got and try and weld that back in so it creates a bit more strength again in this section. Because now the only strength I've got is in this section here. I want to try and add it to the full width of the bracket. So see what I've got. Okay, so I found something. I found this pipe here in the scrap metal bin, and as you can see it's the perfect diameter that I need to cover from this area over across to this area. So I'll slice that in half and give it the same angle, weld it in, cap it, and we'll be good to go. Okay, so we've tacked that section on now. Looks nice and neat. And once it's fully welded, it'll add all the strength back into that whole section there. So instead of it trying to fold itself in this weak point, it'll transfer all the strength back to all these sections via, linking this up. That's a theory anyway. I'm sure that's what it'll do. Alright, so it's test fit time. Alright, so what I just did then, I just smoothed off all the edges. So just sort of radialised the edges just a tiny bit, just to make them more nice and smooth. Just all areas like that. Smoothed off all these edges here as well. Just, with the 120 grit flap disc, it just nicks off just a little bit of the corner and makes them all nice and smooth. So what I want to do now is make some gussets up for areas where I had to cut a little bit 1 mil in with the cutting disc to be able to fold this 3 mil plate. So areas like there, here where the oil filter mount goes, and the main fold here. So I'll just make some gussets up, and I've just drawn one of them out there, which will go in here, sit in between there, and it'll just add a lot of the strength back into it and make it nice and rigid. A teeny tiny one. Teeny tiny one. Okay, so that's all the gusseting done. So that adds strength to those areas where I had previously cut and folded. It actually feels a lot stiffer now. Even just with those tacks being done and not full welds, it already feels nice and solid. Okay, so a little bit of die grinding here and there just to smooth everything off. Just clearance that area out a little bit just to make it all neat, all the welds. Then I'll finger bog them later just to make them look perfect. But that's all good, nice and strong, and it'll be neat enough once I've prepared it for paint. So that's looking good. Now what I needed was some bolts, so mounting bolts. I needed some bolts for this water pump adapter plate. I needed some bolts for the oil filter bracket, and some bolts for the water pump. So I went down to WPS at Wetherill Park and they gave me all these little bag of goodies for $2.20. Yes, just $2.20. Can you believe this? It's amazing, I love those guys. So yeah, bag of all the bits and pieces we needed, nylon lock nuts, even in this tiny little size. Look how cutie. Everything I needed. Unbelievable, I love those guys. So yeah, so let's bolt it all together now and see how it looks. So there we are, it's all in place, sits nicely. You can see how the two outlets sort of line up. I'll have to, you know, find the hose that suits, plus the hose that comes up to that outlet there, or where the water pump used to be. So two hoses need to go there. Then I've got to make up, you know, fittings that go from the oil filter adapter onto the bracket. And then you can see where there's enough room now to locate the oil filter. It won't hit the rack, it won't hit the chassis. Nice neat little spot, and you can get to it from underneath, so it's accessible. Alright, so we're getting to the pointy end of things. So what we've got to do now is try and find hoses that suit what I've created, basically. So you can't go into the store and go, I need a hose for a Cortina with an electric water pump fitted into this spot, and obviously. So you've got to go in there. They usually have, like, I went to Super Cheap just then and usually got all these hoses just lying around on multiple shelves in different sizes and in different bends and everything. So obviously they must get the most common hoses. I measured the external diameter of the water pump outlet and inlets, and they seem to be around 38mm. You have to measure without the lip, so that's the trick. With the lip they're 40mm, without the lip they're 38mm. So I took the ruler into Super Cheap, measured this up. This measures up at approximately 37mm. So I grabbed this one. This one does work, and it does have the bend that I need for the bottom from the radiator to the water pump inlet. But I also grabbed this one to see if it would do for the top. Actually, I grabbed this one for the bottom, I grabbed this one for the top. This one is not long enough for the top part, which goes from the outlet of the water pump into the neck that goes into the head. I grabbed this one's too large. So even though this one measures up at 40mm, which is what I measured it at, it's too loose inside the neck. So a little bit smaller, 37, which is actually 38 without the lip, is ideal. So it's this size that I'm going to be needing. So I just kept the receipt. I'll have to go back there, you know, back and forth. So I'm just going to vary it up between days. So I won't go back today. It's a pain in the bum. So I'll go back tomorrow, take the receipt, return that hose, and I saw one that was quite long enough, but because I measured it and I thought, oh, it's going to be a bit small, I think that might be ideal, and I'll try that out. But that's the only way to do it. Yeah, long and tedious, but you get there in the end, and you do end up with a hose that looks standard, which is better than getting those bendy ones, in my opinion. They look a bit funny. I know all the corrugated just look cheap and nasty, even though they do the job. I prefer something that looks standard. It makes the job look a bit more finished, in my sense. Okay, so what I've done now, I've just taken some rough measurements of the length that I need and how much degrees of bend I need to cut at to suit the application. So I've marked it out with some masking tape. I'll just cut it with a Stanley knife and see how that goes. Okay, so here it is, all in place. All the hoses are fitted now. So that's the hose that we had to modify there, that bottom one that I've cut to the size that I needed. This one seems to have fitted. I don't know what it's off, but I just found it super cheap with the length and angle that I needed and the size. The bottom was a bit tight to fit into the water pump outlet there, but it does fit. So that's okay. It was a bit easier to get onto the other side, I think, because it's just flared a little bit. But that's in. You can see the water pumps there, I'll have to run the lines later, but I'll be doing all my lines and fittings at the very end of the build. So I'll leave that as it is, but it all clears. You can see it clears the steering rack, so the oil filter will sit in nicely. And you can see where the water pump used to be, that little neck is there now, all nice and neat. And this is the standard Cortina top radiator hose. So just have to knock off a little bit of that because there was a little bit long that sat around about there. I'm guessing that the original Cortina radiator, which I can't remember how fat it was, would have maybe sat at that point. So I just cut a little length off here, maybe about 20 mil, and that sits a lot neater now. But you can see everything fits, nothing's touching, nothing's rubbing against anything else. It's all nice. Should work. It's not the prettiest thing, but I need access. See, I need access to this area. Would have been nice to maybe create a little cap here. I might still create one. It won't be that big. This does drop down 10 mil before it's able to be removed from this area here. So I might create a little piece there that sort of caps it in a way and makes it look a little bit neater. But maybe once it's painted and everything and all the fittings are there and everything, you might not notice it as much. So I'll have to wait and see. Things can be made pretty later, as long as it's functional. Okay. So that's pretty much it for the cooling system side of the Cortina. I've got to do a few little bits and pieces. Where the plate sits where the water pump used to be, for some reason they've created the holes much larger than the shaft of the actual bolt that goes through it. So where the bolt sits in that hole, it's got quite a bit of play. So I'm not happy with that. I might put a sleeve or something around the bolt if I can get the exact size that fits in the hole of the plate and around the bolt, so the bolt is central and locates that piece perfectly, so there's no way that piece can move or shift or anything like that, because once you've sealed it, you don't want that sort of moving or vibrating loose or anything like that, and you don't want to be just clamping it just with the bolts. You want it to locate itself, to a point. So I'll probably work on that later. I've got to do the lines, of course, so I've got to make the fittings. See if I'm going to run a hard line, because the whole thing is one unit. So I might run a hard line because it'll look nice and neat and like a standard sort of thing, which is the look I'm sort of going for. I don't think I'll go for a braid or a flex, but I'll have to see when I get to that stage and see what fittings fit and the angle that they sit at and all that sort of stuff. But that can come along later. That other hose that sort of looks like a right angle was a bit tight to go into the water pump. I'm not overly happy with the way that looks. It was the only thing I was able to find. If I do come across one that has a nice natural curve from point A to point B, which is what I need, and in the two sizes, so this inlet and outlet or whatever, for the inside diameter of the hose, then I'll replace that as well. But at the moment, it is what it is. It reaches the 2 points, and yeah, it doesn't look pretty, but there is things that will be going in the way. So there will be the intake manifold there, the intercooler piping, the coil packs will be sitting underneath the intake manifold, so it might take the eye away from that. Plus I've got to put a crank angle sensor on the timing cover of the motor, and that would be perfect to sit underneath that sort of bend, so where it sits here, I'll put the crank angle sensor here. But we'll see how that goes. That's something that can be changed later, and it's very easy. It's just a hose. It's only $20 piece, so it's not a wasted amount or anything like that. So we'll see how that goes. I haven't bought any of the clamps also for the hoses. I want to try and run something that looks similar to the T-bolt clamps that I've got for the intercooler piping and the silicone hose. I just like the look of them. They're nice and fat and thick, and they look robust, whereas the old worm drive ones, they just don't quite fit the rest of the look that I'm going for. So I'm going to see if I can get a set of T-bolts and if they fit and they clamp enough. If not, I'll see what options are available. I like looking at other clamps and seeing what's available. There's always new technologies coming about. I have seen thinner hose clamps that look like a T-bolt, aren't quite a T-bolt, but work in a similar fashion and don't have the grooves for the worm drive, so they look a little cleaner, a little smoother, adds a little bit of chrome to the bail, not too much shiny stuff, but that would be a nice compromise. What I'll be doing next is mounting the alternator. The alternator at the moment sits quite high. If it was put in its natural position now, it would sit just under the turbo. I want to mount it low, so I'll have to modify this standard bracket. So this is the way it sits at the moment. Basically, I just want to mirror it and make it sit low. So it's still, everything would line up exactly the same as the way it would, which would line up with the pulley. I just need to mount it much lower. So I'll probably pull that apart, which is going to be welded together. So they're just flat plates that have been cut and drilled and welded. So I'll pull that apart first, see if I can reverse it and mount it to the exact same spot on the block but lower, and see how that looks. I'm going to go for a bigger alternator because I'll be running a lot more electrical parts. The one I'm looking at the moment is a 120 amp off a Holden. Oh no, the bloody Holden part! But anyway, you got to do what you got to do. So I'll get that, put it on and see how that goes. So I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I hope you look forward to the next episode. If you do like the video, please give a like, subscribe and leave a comment. Thanks again.